Hey guys, welcome to the Massive Iron Channel. I'm Steve Shaw. In this video, I'm going to give you a guide to building bigger delts. Before I get into this topic, if you guys have any questions or comments, drop them down below. The best topic ideas I turn into videos just like this. If you need coaching, I'd love to work with you. Check out the link down below. All right, let's build some big boulder delts, shall we? Some cannonball delts, some softball-sized delts, whatever you want to call them. I'm going to give you guys some basic information on delt anatomy, and we're going to round it off with how to train the delts, each head of the deltoids, and then we'll show you some sample workouts. Now, first off, there are three heads to the delts. You have the anterior, which is the front head. You have the lateral or medial, which is a side head, and you have the rear delt or the posterior deltoid. Anatomically, the deltoid muscle is comprised of these three distinct areas, and how we train them is going to be vastly different. It's not always the same. It's not equated. Now, when we're looking at the front delt, training the front delts, there's no need to directly train the front delts. The front deltoids are heavily involved with all pressing movements, whether it's horizontal pressing or vertical pressing. All of them will hit the front delts to a very substantial degree. It will be hard for you to find a seasoned lifter that doesn't have just huge front delts from years and years of pressing. There's no need to do direct front delt work because all the pressing you're going to do with overhead pressing, with bench pressing, with dumbbell benching, even with things like your machine presses or your dips, those are going to naturally develop your front delts to a point where you will not need any direct front delt work unless you are some kind of a rare outlier or freak. If you're currently doing front delt work, I highly encourage you to set that aside and use that time for something else. You could use it for rear delts. That would be time better spent. Now, the rear delts are heavily involved in all horizontal and vertical rowing and pulling. This is like lat pull downs, like pull-ups, like pendlay rows, dumbbell rows, seated cable rows, machine rows. All the pulling motions where you're pulling a weight towards your body from overhead or towards your body along the horizontal plane, that will hit your rear delts. Now, this is not going to hit your rear delts as hard as the pressing hits your front delts. Therefore, it is a good idea to get in some direct rear delt work each week. Now, how much rear delt work you get in depends on your goals. If you want to have aesthetically perfect delts, perfect symmetry, then you want to add in 3 to 6 sets for rear delts each week. Quite honestly, if you don't really care about it, I'd encourage you just to stick to 3 sets for rear delts weekly. A lot of lifters don't even do rear delts because of the impact that rowing and pulling has upon the rear delts. I would say, and this is just a rough guess, that all the pull-ups and lat pull-downs and rows you do will provide about 80% of your front delt size over the course of your lifting career. All the little minor rear delt work from bent over flies or face pulls or whatever you're doing, that'll account for about the remaining 20%. So front delt work you don't want to do, rear delt work you want to add in just a little bit each week, but it's not going to be your primary focus during your shoulder workouts. Now, the meat and potatoes of shoulder day or shoulder training or your weekly shoulder work is going to be the side delts or the medial delts. The side delts are hit very hard through vertical pressing movements, and overhead pressing movements should make up the majority of your weekly shoulder training volume. I would say at least 75%. Now, obviously, overhead pressing is going to work to a degree. Your front delts, it's going to hit them substantially enough, again, where you do not need front delt work. Now, here's some basic advice for your weekly delt training. The following is a good starting point for your weekly delt work, your weekly delt volume. You can adjust this volume and the exercise selection as needed. So this is not a rule. This is just simply a good starting point. For your rear delts, 3+ sets per week. You can do 3 to 6. I really don't see any value in going above that. Side delts, you want to have about 9 to 12 sets per week. And front delts, 0. This will give you about 12 to 15 or 12 to 18 sets per week for shoulders. If you're training 3 days a week, obviously you're going to chop that down to maybe 3 sets for rear delts and maybe 9 sets for side delts. If you're training 5 days a week doing a push-pull legs or something like that, you'll be able to hit 3 to 6 sets for rear delts and probably an easy 12 sets for your side delts. Now, some delt training notes. Overhead pressing and lifts like side lateral raises and upright rows also work to varying degrees the traps. You're going to notice that if you come to these lifts and you haven't done them for a while, there's a likelihood when you do heavy overhead presses or side lateral raises, you're going to notice the next day or the next couple of days that your traps are sore as well. That's normal because your traps are involved in kind of pulling that shoulder or the neck up. And when you are pressing up, the traps are going to play a role in that pressing movement, even in that side lateral movement and your upright row movement. Now, as a minimum, you want 2 big, beefy overhead press movements per week. This is a minimum, bare minimum. By this, I mean a barbell overhead press, a dumbbell overhead press, a machine, or a Smith press. Now, finally, the delts are commonly underworked in the lifting industry. Do not be afraid to hit them hard and heavy. There's this kind of fear that your delts are made of glass and that you can't overtrain them. This is absolutely nonsense. I've been training the delts hard and heavy for 38 years. Never had a delt injury, never had a shoulder joint injury. Just be smart, be safe, and attack your delts hard just like every other major body part. Now, let's look at some exercise choices. This is not comprehensive, but these are really good starting points. For your side delts, some of the primary choices are going to be barbell overheads, all variations, doesn't matter. Use a variation you like or rotate between variations, seated, standing, behind the neck, push press, strict military press, doesn't matter. For your dumbbell overheads, they could be seated or standing or even single arm standing overheads, doesn't really matter. You could throw in the Arnold press variation into the mix. That's a variation I like as well. Then you have your machine overheads and your Smith machine overheads. These are kind of your A-tier big hitters for your side delts. Secondary choices would be side lateral raises, upright rows, or high pulls, which is kind of a more explosive variation of the upright row. And my exercise creation, the bulldozer lateral, which is a single arm lateral where you're starting on the opposite leg and you're gaining a little bit more momentum and power. Now, your rear delts, you could go with bent over flies, face pulls, reverse pec deck, which is a quality movement, rear delt swings, which is something I enjoy. I do on a weekly basis. And if you're not familiar with this, I would head over to the YouTubes and search rear delt swings. And then you have the seated bent fly where you're kind of seated, you're bent over, and you're doing that bent over fly motion. Now let's look at a couple sample workouts. I didn't flesh these out with set and rep schemes. You guys can do what you want. But this is a sample or example full body workout. The shoulder work or the delt work is in the yellow. I didn't put rear delt work in here because you could kind of fit that in on any day you wanted. In this basic skeleton or structure, we have the major body parts, and we have the arm work, and you could fit in other things like abs and traps, calves and rear delts where you want. So you can see on workout A, we have week 1 seated dumbbell overhead press and week 2 machine overhead. This allows us to get in a little bit of variation on kind of our secondary shoulder movement for the week. Workout B is a little bit lighter. We're going to rotate between week 1 and week 2 with side lateral raises and upright rows. Upright rows could obviously be cable upright rows if you want. And then workout C, we're going to do the big hitter overhead presses. The reason why we put it on workout C on a full body, or the reason why I tend to put it on workout C on a full body, is because I tend to put everyone's favorite pressing movement, the bench press, on workout A. Then on workout C, I like to lead with the big shoulder press. Now let's compress this into an upper posterior, and there is an error in this PDF where it says seated cable rows. That should say machine overhead press. But on upper A, you're going to have week 1, week 2, seated dumbbell overhead press. And where it says week 2 machine overhead, you drop that into where it says a seated cable row position. And on upper B, you would have the overhead press to lead off. And then you would have side lateral raises or upright rows. So there you have it, guys. Let me know what you think. Drop a comment down below and let me know how you train your delts on a weekly basis, how frequently, which exercises, and even your set and rep schemes. So thanks for watching, guys. Have a great week.